Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Hairymuppet. Welcome back to another video. As you can see, we've got little circles on all the trains. This is with the 0.08 beta. I got in trouble for saying cache earlier, so I'm just going to say beta. And if you don't like it, then go ahead and comment and let me know how much you don't like it, but I'm going to keep on saying it. So this is going to be a tutorial. So we've done a walkthrough of the base before, and this is going to be a tutorial. So we're going to start, this is our normal MAM. This is our regular normal MAM, and we're going to go through all of the different logic setups for the normal MAM. It's a normal 4-layer, including pins MAM. And then we're going to go through and we're just going to look at the circuits basically. And we're going to walk through. So I'm going to start here. I'm going to start all the way over here. So this is the circles, and we've got 4 different platforms, and we've got one platform per quarter. Platform per quad? I don't know. I'm going nuts. But anyway, so this is the way my MAM works. You can do it differently if you want, but this is the way that my MAM works. So we're going to go through it step by step. We're going to look in minute detail at all the logic that goes on. So for each layer, you send in 4 belts and then you split them off if you need them. So the way this works is we have the global wire receiver on channel 0 red. And if I'm going to start the start, I might actually want to start over here. Well, I've moved it all the way to the home area. So we're just going to have a quick look at this one, because this is the core of my MAM, I suppose you could say. This is the bit that sort of splits out the channel to all the 4 different things. So ignore the button, because that's the speed MAM particular thing. So we can actually just replace that there. And it's permanently on. And I'm actually going to turn the speed MAM off because I don't want it messing with the lag. So let's talk about the circuit and all the different components that you used here. So this guy is a global wire receiver. This guy is a global wire transmitter. So the first thing you need to know is that wires carry different things on them. And if you don't want to know what the wire is carrying, you can just put a display on it and then pop it out. So maybe we should start for wire tutorial and sort of see what's going on. So this guy is a button. You toggle it, it gets 1. You toggle it off and it gets null. You might have thought it gets 0 out if it's untoggled, but it gets null. Now, it's very important to understand the basics of wires. So yeah, we definitely will start with the wires then. So there are 3, there's like a whole bunch of different values, but let's talk about the first 3. So we've got 1, we've got null, and we've got 0. So it's very important to understand that null is different from 0. So 0 is a value, null is a lack of a value. So if we go over here and we copy this over, now we're going to give an example of here. So for example, this one's passing out null. And when you put anything through a logic gate, any of these logic gates, it automatically turns it into a 1 or a 0. These ones only output 1s or 0s. The gate is slightly different. The gate works differently, but these ones only put out 1s or 0s. And we're going to confirm that because I'm not 100% sure, but yeah. So this one, so if we toggle it, you can see it's putting out a 0 now. So this one puts out a 1 or a 0. Now, if we go through, we can show off a couple of these other gates as well. Let's, for example, show off an AND gate. So an AND gate, I'm not going to go through all of these, but I'll go through a couple of them. An AND gate basically takes the 2 signals that it's being given, and it pops out 1 if they're both good, and 0 if one of them is off. So as you can see, no matter what we do, it doesn't output null. And we're going to replace that with an OR gate, and that outputs 1 if one of the input signals is good, and it outputs 0 if both of them are off. So These you can play around with and figure them out. Not, we already talked about. XOR, we'll just show that real quick. It toggles 1 if 1 is on, but if both are on, then it toggles 0. That's kind of a complicated one. We don't really need that one. So we're going to ignore that. But the main thing to understand is that all of these logic gates, the first 5 anyway, pop out either a 1 or a 0. No, there's no question, there's no argument. They always pop out a 1 or a 0. And there is also a null signal, and you can get a null signal in a few different ways. First off, if you've got a button turned off, and then you toggle it and it turns on to, so if we actually get a display up here, let's have a look at what it is. So it's a 1 or it's a null. So now we're going to, so we've talked about the button. You'll never use the button. The button is not all that important in a MAM. We've talked about the wires and the gates and the display. The display is beautiful. It just shows you. If it's blank, that means null. So for example, we're going to get a signal producer out here, and the signal producer, you can see a null is equal to this one. Now, if we turn this on, now it's equal to 1 and is no longer equal. So the output is 0. Now, if we change this signal producer to 1, suddenly it's equal again, which is beautiful. Now, notice we toggle this off and we change this to 0. They are not equal. Okay, this is 0, this is null. They are not equal. But if you delete, by default, it gets set to null, and suddenly they are equal again. So 0, 1, and null are 3 completely different parameters. The 0 and the 1s are mostly used when they're outputting from logic gates or from buttons, and the nulls are mostly used when it comes from shapes. So let's do an example of a few shapes. So we'll get the signal producers out here. Yeah. Well, we'll step through a little bit of this sort of stuff, and we'll look at the shape analyzer, and then we'll sort of test what's going on. So, for example, let's start with this one. This is a fairly interesting shape. We can't actually copy. We can't copy the shape that it's currently looking at. Let's actually go in. Let's look for a nice easy one. I don't want one with any pins, because the pins are going to confuse things. So let's go ahead. Let's get a single section. Let's make that empty. Okay, so we've got 3 squares and the top left one is empty. So you can see we're sending the full shape signal over here. So that's 3 squares. So a full shape of any type, of any amount of layers, can be sent over as a signal. Now, this one is sending this full shape over here like this, has limited uses. The only thing that you really do with this one is using a belt filter. So for example, if you did this and you copied it over there, what will happen is every shape that is exactly this one will go through the tick. Every shape that isn't this one goes through the cross. Now, we'll talk a little bit more about belt filters later. We'll do a whole thing about belt filters, but for now, we'll just talk about the signals. So this entire signal is going through the wire. Now, you can do a few different things, and that's what these simulated buildings are for. So these are to the signal on the wire, pretty much the same thing as these to the actual shape on the conveyor belt. So if you think about this as a conveyor belt which is sending a virtual shape around, then you can use the simulated buildings. For example, we send a half destroyer. You can see it's cut off the left-hand side. Now this is confusing because you could be looking at this and you could be thinking, oh, it's cutting off the right-hand side. No, it's cutting off the left-hand side. It doesn't matter how you rotate it, it always cuts off the left-hand side. So we'll get rid of that. Now we can get another simulated building, which is the rotator. You can see that rotates. So we'll be using a lot of these rotators and cutters to do various things later on. We've got the simulated stacker and the unstacker. You can see examples of them here. So this is the full shape. We unstack it. The left-hand side is the top and the right-hand side is the rest of it. And then so if we put a display here, we can actually see that this one is exactly the same, except it doesn't have the 2 dots here. So if we have a look at that shape, we can see it's pulled off those 2 dots and it's just got the other 3 layers. So it's the bottom 3 layers basically. And then we pull off this, which is the second layer. And then if we have a look, well, there it is. You can see it's just got the bottom 2 layers with that pin that was hidden under. It was actually, the pin wasn't on the second layer. The second layer only had a dot, a single dot, this one. And then we can see we pull them apart. So there's their basic unstackers. So we get rid of that and we get rid of that. Now, so that's passing signals through wires. And we've got all these different buildings that do all these different things. This simulated pin pusher was added in 0.08. So if you haven't upgraded to the beta, you may not see this one yet. And yeah, they basically do what they expect, what you expect them to do. Stuff like the simulated painter. I'm not sure if it's important which input the color goes in and which input the shape goes in. You can play around with that, to be honest. Let's have a look actually, because what we can do is we can do color-R, which is red. That's not a shape, that's just a color. You can sort of tell because the background is blue. We send that in there, and there we go. It's painted the entire shape red, which is you may not actually know, but if you paint, you can paint over a color. It does work like that. So if we do this, and then we do that, it doesn't work. So they have to be in a particular color, which is fine because, yeah, usually the shape input is the straight path from one side to the other, and then the color input is the one that comes in from the side. And that's the same thing that works for the simulated crystallizer. There's no visual indication of that, which is a little bit annoying, but that is the way it works. The color will come in from the side. That looked surprisingly... Wait a second. The crystal generator has the same icon as the painter. That's not cool. That's not good. Devs need to fix that up, please. Yeah. So, moving forward. We've talked about the signals. We've talked about the simulated buildings. The last simulated building is probably the most important one, and we'll talk about that now. That is the shape analyzer. So what this one does is it spits out 2 different signals, and the signal that comes out straight is the shape. The signal that comes out from the side is the color, and it always takes the top right corner. So you can see this one right here is the top right one. So say we change this to be like that. So now the bottom right corner is red. So we're still taking the top right corner, which is blue, which is this square up here. So it's a square and it's blue. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to put a display here, and we're not doing anything, so that's fine. If we rotate it, now here's the interesting thing. We rotated it right. There's no rotate. So now the top right is empty. And so what happens? Null gets spit out into the color. Null gets spit out into the shape. So these are both null. The fact that they're just blank means they're null. So what we're going to do is, it's very important to understand that an empty segment produces null. It's extremely important to understand. It's not producing 0, it's producing null. So now if we rotate it 3 times, the red one is on the top right, and we can see we got the shape and we got the red color. So this shape analyzer will always print out the color, the shape in the top right little corner there. So that's also important to understand. So yeah, so that's pretty much all of it. The only thing we haven't talked about is the belt filter. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. And I'll just sort of go through the different modes. There is a belt reader as well. That spits out a signal, and the signal it spits out is what's currently on the belt. So if we do a belt filter, for example, belt reader, sorry. So we just do that. It spits out the shape that's on the belt. It does have a number here which is the amount of items passing on that belt per minute. It's the belt throughput per minute. This number does not get put out on the signal, and there is no way to make that number go out on the signal. So if you're trying to do something fancy with some sort of overflow thing where you want it to sort of overflow if the speed is a certain amount or something wacky like that, you can't do it. It only outputs the shape on the belt reader. And to be honest, I have not found a use for that in the MAM, so it's not all that important. The belt filter is incredibly important. It's basically the entire MAM is built on the belt filter. So we're going to see it in action a bit more, but I'll just sort of run through the different modes that it works on here. So basically, you can pass two different types of things into here. And depending on what you pass in, it'll do different things. So first off, if you pass any shape in, if that shape comes on the belt, it'll go forward. If any other shape passes in, it'll go on the X. So usually what you do here is you put a trash right there. Anything that doesn't match that shape will go directly in the trash. That's how all my dumpers are built in the MAM. And this is the dumper, basically. You just put this on there, filters through, and yeah, that's pretty straightforward. The other way you use it is, I wonder if we can actually demonstrate with this with some items on the belt. Let's go find some items on the belt, actually, because this is a little bit hard to demonstrate without items on the belt. So give me a second. Okay. There we go. So we've got some items coming out on the belt here. And this is this guy. So we can go in, we can click it, we can copy the shape code, and we're going to do a basic little test here. So we've got, where's our belt filter? Flow control, belt filter. So as you can see, there's no input to the belt filter. So that's exactly the same as if we were to just put null in there. So when there's null, the belt filter just stalls. It doesn't send anything through. Now, what we're going to do is I'm going to configure this to have the shape. So this exact shape, as you can see, it's going through and it's going perfectly straight. Now, if I was configure this to be CB, suddenly we've got a blue corner at the top left, and you can see all of these shapes are being destroyed. They're not matching, so they just go straight in the trash. That's weird. I pressed Control Z, but it didn't reset this shape. Anyway, we don't need that anymore. You can see how it works. Now let's try praying it. So null does nothing. If you put in a 1, it sends it through. If you put in a 0, it sends it off. So we'll be using this a lot later on. For example, for equals checks, like, let's do something a little bit more complicated. So we'll paste this. No, I don't know what that is. Let's not do that. Let's not paste in whatever the hell that was. Copy shape code, configure, and then we're going to go on a little bit of a journey here. So we rotate it, and then we do I'm getting a lot of messages. Hopefully nothing crazy is going on. So this is, so we've rotated it once and then shape analyzed it, and we got the top corner, which is nothing. If we did this, then we get something. So what we're going to do is I'm going to put an equals check here. And on the other side is going to have null. So this is not equal to null. So it's pointing at 0 and it's dumping everything else. Now, if we put the rotator back in there, suddenly it is equal to null. It's putting at 1 and it's dumping that sort of stuff out. So yeah. So basically what you can do is you can put a not here, and then basically what you're doing is, if this thing is null, then we're dumping out. And this exact logic is something that we use a lot later on. So we'll sort of go through that in a bit more detail. And I'm actually going to look at my phone, make sure that nothing crazy is going on. No, it's not. It's just a couple of miscellaneous messages. Okay, So we're 20 minutes into the video. We've explained the basics of pretty much all these. And you can see this pipe gate. This is new to the beta. This works pretty much the same. I haven't tested it thoroughly, but I'm assuming the inputs will do the same thing. So 1 turns it on, 0 turns it off, null stalls it. We might play around with that a little bit later. But for now, let's go over to the MAM and we're going to walk through it bit by bit, looking at all the different stages, all the different operations. So just to clarify, this is the entire MAM. This is the first layer, and each one of these rows is 1/4. So if you remember back from the start, excuse me, I need a drink, man. Lots of talking. I need a drink. So yeah, we split it up into, we did the unstacking and we split it up into the transmitters. So yeah, that was, I forgot to mention that. Actually, let's go and double check that. I didn't mention the global receivers and the transmitters because these are important. So global wire receiver receives something. The global wire transmitter transmits something. If you have more than one transmitter on channel 0 red, you will end up with a lot of jittering signals. For example, if we do that, we've got null going into the transmitter and we got this signal. And this guy is just spitting out null. I don't know, I would have thought you'd have, maybe the null overrides it. No, I don't want that shape. CU. Let's see what happens. I wonder why, maybe there's some sort of ordering thing. Like we change that to green and then red. Yeah, I don't know. I would have thought that would cause more problems. I mean, if we get rid of this, then it goes back to the double dot. Maybe in the beta, they changed something to sort of not have it jitter, to have it sort of do some sort of ordering to say this one was placed last, so this one takes priority or something like that. Anyway, never have more than one transmitter on the same color because it'll just cause problems. So anyway, we split up the one thing into 4 transmitters by unstacking it. And then this is our global wire receiver for channel 0 red. So if we put a display, we can see that this is the entire shape that it's getting, which is just 2 dots. Now, this bottom thing is the top right. So we don't actually need to do any rotation to sort of get the next shape. We just, we're using the shape analyzer to get the top right corner. We get it here, it's null. Now, if the incoming signal is a circle, then we knot it. So the reason we knot it is because we want to go through the X in a valid situation. So if this color matches, then we want to go through the X. So that's why we have to knot it here. And it kind of makes sense. You could recode it to say have, if we close this off again, to say have this be the belt that goes on, and this one be the belt that sort of goes up here and then goes off to the rest of the factory. And in that case, you wouldn't have the knot. But I like using the X as the kind of thing where we actually want the color. So I tend to knot them all the time. But yeah, so in this case, it's null. We don't need a circle, so we're not going to send it off. And I'm actually going to skip up to the 4th layer here because the 4th layer actually has interesting things going on. So this guy, the bottom layer is this, a square, circle, circle. So at the top right, it is a circle. The shape analyzer gives us a circle, and the shape analyzer only gives us that element in the top right. So we need to manually equals it to this hard-coded top right unpainted circle. And if that is true, then we send the signal, it tells it to go off there. Now we can't send the signal directly into the belt filter because this is a quarter circle and this is a full circle, so they wouldn't match. You could turn this into a full circle and then use a belt filter. Yeah. But we do that slightly later. But for now, this is one way of doing it. And we use multiple different methods of doing things throughout the MAM depending on how I was feeling at the time. But so yeah. So we go over to the next one. And this one's basically doing the same thing. So it takes the shape, does the shape analyzer, gets the little circle out of the top right, gets the color as well, and we'll deal with the color later, and then it sends it over here. So this is the other option I was telling you about. So it's taking this circle and it's sending it in 4 different directions and doing 4 different things to it. So you can see here, if we hook these guys up, oh, these are on a different level. That's why they're not connecting. So we'll put some displays here so you can see a little bit more clearly. Whoop. 3. So what's happening here is we've got this little quarter circle. This one, nothing happens to it. This one, we rotate it once, we rotate it twice, and we rotate it 3 times. So the 4 quarters in the 4 different orientations. We stack the 2 on the left to get this shape. We stack the 2 on the right to get this shape. And then we stack these 2 halves. I put that display in the wrong space. I put it in the wrong space again. Should be like this. And then we get the full circle. So this is just a nice simple way of turning 1/4 circle into a full circle. And then once we've got that full circle, we send that signal over to here and we attach it to a belt filter. And then that belt filter sends it through. Now, what we could have done the same thing here. What we could have done is we could have said, for example, if we get rid of all of this crap, what we do is we say, where's my equals? And then we do signal producer, and then it's CU. Yeah, and then we just pass it through and it does exactly the same thing. It spits out 1 at the end instead of the signal, but it basically, it does the same thing. There's 2 different ways of getting the same required functionality. Now this other belt filter, excuse me, this one is a null dumper. This bloody cough. So basically it takes in the signal, and if it's null, then it knots it and sends it through. Because obviously if it's equal to null, like for example, we're going to go back, we're going to leave that one, and we're going to go back right to the start. And this is the top right of this guy. So you can see if we do the shape analyzer, it comes out as null. We stack it, and it's still null, because if you stack null, you still get null. And here we compare it to null, and then we say, okay, and then we knot it to spit out 0, and that will basically activate this one. And the reason we do that is because we're sending null shape here, null at this one. That means we're sending null to the belt filter, which means this belt filter will sit there and do nothing, which is unfortunate because we want to clear the belt, but this one will basically just sit there and do nothing. So here we go, we compare, is it null? If it is, knot it to send out 0, and then the 0 will cause this belt filter to function correctly and actually clear the belt. So this is just to clear the belt in the case where you switch from one shape to another and there's a null bit here and you clear it off. This is not really necessary for a MAM because it's just neatening this belt. And in fact, I don't do it in any other place on this belt. So if we go all the way over to here, you can see these guys are not being cleared off. They're just sitting there and hogging up the belt because there's no null clearer here. But that's fine. We just leave them there. So yeah, let's go over to the bottom layer again, the bottom shape, which if you remember is this shape. So we're sending the color over in this signal wire here. And this is a white signal color. And then what we do is we have 7 different platforms for 7 different colors. Now we send the signal across the platform, And the way you do that is you just drag a wire from one platform to another, and it automatically creates one of these. So this is a transmitter, this is a receiver. It's basically just like a little conveyor bridge, except for wires. And we've hidden this wire on the second level. So when we turn the third level on, it gets hidden underneath this conveyor belt, but that's fine. So we're sending this one over. And all we're doing is saying, is it equal to the color white, which is color-W in this thing? And if it is, then we knot it and we send it down to this belt. So in this case, when the wire looks like it's turned off, that's the color that we want. So we send it down. And this one is solid green, which means that we don't care about that and we want to send it on. Now, in this case, they're all being sent off early. But if we go down to another shape, this is pins, this is grays. So in this case, this wire is solid, which means it's not matching on there. So this is producing a 0, but then we knot it up to a 1. That sends it on, and then this guy just continues to go on. So this is how we do color selection. We basically send the signal from the shape analyzer, compare it to the hard-coded color in a signal producer. If it is equal, we dot it and we send it off to here. And once again, you could have this belt going down and you could have this belt going up and then back onto the main line. And if you did that, you would not need to put the knot here because you would be sending the green one off to the color thing. And that's pretty much the circuits for the color selection. There's only ever going to be one color per quarter. So once it gets sent down, it gets colorized. And from a bit of a logistical point of view, it just goes back on the belt. And yeah, as you can see, we're sending this signal down all the way through. So this signal just gets sent all the way down to the final platform. It doesn't need to go here. This is just an overhang, so we could get rid of that. But yeah, it goes through all the different platforms. Now, when you start dealing with fluid filters, you will be doing different stuff. Might talk about that at the end. Might sort of go into that a little bit at the end. But yeah, for now, we're just explaining the way I did the MAM, and this is the way that you currently do it. So yeah, don't ask me why there's a gap there. It's because I was messing around with it before. Yeah, but that's how we get through. And at the end, we just merge all those together. So at this point, the shape will be colored. It'll be the correct shape. It'll be whatever it is. Now here is just a dumper, basically. I'll go through the circuit logic for this a little bit. This is quite complicated, actually, so I wouldn't recommend trying to do this yourself, but we'll go through it anyway. So basically, this guy has to do a few funky things to figure out exactly what the shape is going to be. Now, you probably could simplify this quite a bit, actually, because this is going through the shape analyzer, which splits apart the shape and the color, and then it's painting it, but it's also skipping the painter if it's a pin. And to be honest, I mean, what we could do is just get rid of all of this. And then what is this corner? This is this corner. So you could do basically what we do here, which is another way to get the corner out. Whoa, that's not what I meant to do. So if we have a look, this is the shape, and we're getting the top. We're getting the top left. I wanted the bottom left. Did I get the wrong one? Okay, yeah, there's the bottom left. Yeah, okay, that makes more sense. We'll get onto the stackers in a sec. But yeah, so this is actually probably an easier way of doing it. And then what you do is you send it through here. It still gets a circle out at the end, so it kind of works. There's kind of two different routes. So you use the shape analyzer, You get the shape, you get the color, and you build it up from there. But then you have to get some very complicated logic in there when there's pins, because you can't color the pins. Because, yeah, but if you do this, we're rotating it twice to get the circle at the top right. We cut, which basically leaves the circle and this pin. Then we rotate it once more, cut it, which leaves the circle at the bottom right and the pin cut off. And then we rotate it once again to get the circle at the bottom left. So this is probably a much simpler way of doing it. If we actually look at the way that I did code it up, yeah, what it's doing, and I won't go into this too much detail, but it's basically what the problem with this colorizer is that, let's say we get rid of this guy. This colorizer gets a pin, but it gets a null color. It doesn't output anything. It doesn't just send the pin uncolorized through. It outputs nothing. And that's what I think the colorizer does at any time it gets a null paint signal. But we still want the pin to go out. So what we do is we say, is this signal equal to a pin? If it is, then we use the gate. I haven't talked about the gate before. The gate, basically, all it does is, if you put a 1 in here, then it sends this signal through. If you put a 0 here, it cuts this signal off and it doesn't send anything out there. So if we have a look, so we turn that off, it basically just says null. So it just outputs null. It doesn't output 0, it just nulls it, basically. So yeah. And there was... Oh, the other thing I'd like to mention is that you can share circuit networks. So this one has a potential to output something. This one has the potential to output something as well. But yeah, if they output something both at the same time, then you are in trouble. So for example, this one is outputting the painted color. This one is outputting nothing. Now, if I were to change this to be a 1, you can see right now it's actually outputting this gray on both of them, which is why there's no clash. Now, what we can do is I can do this. And I could say, see you. Now it goes red. And we've got a big old exclamation mark here. Because this one's trying to put out a circle on the top right. This one's trying to put out a pointy on the top right. They're trying to put it both on the same signal network. That's not allowed, so you get a red wire, and this one complains. And everything else downstream will just fail. So, yeah, you can do funky stuff like this, as long as you don't override it. So either this one will be output, or this one will be output. So this one won't output if there's a pin here. This one will output if there's a pin here. So that's how we can get away with doing that fancy stuff. So yeah, there we go. That is beautiful. And that's just a dumper, a nice simple dumper for this one. Now, this is the stacker. And it's very important that we understand how the stacker works. So I'm going to go out and I'm going to look at layer 4 first, because layer 4 is nice and simple. So basically, if we look at the original shape that comes out, just copy that and display layer 4, is this one. Now this is the right side of the shape. So we got a circle here, that's the bottom right, and then this is the top right. So this is the top right circle. So we've got two valid ones here. So we want them to go in the middle and stack. So that one's straightforward. In that case, we want the belts to go through. Now, if we look at another example, which is, let's say, layer, this one. This one is different. So we look at the display, and we can see on the right-hand side, the top is null, and the bottom is an arrow. So this is the bottom right, this is the top right, completely null. So in this case, we don't want this one to go in the stacker because it will just sit there and get stuck. We want it to skip the stacker. So basically, the way you do this is you look at the opposite other side of the stacker. So in this case, this one's got the bottom right, so we get the signal for the top right, and this is what this is producing. So it cuts out the left-hand side, rotates, cuts out the it works basically. We could use the shape analyzer in here to get it out, but we don't. We just rotate it and do some rotation, and then we get out the null, which is the top right, remaining top right after we do all the rotates and cuts. We compare it. Is it equal to null? Yes. We knot that, and then we spit it out on the X. So this is basically passing down a 0 signal, which results in all of these ones getting sent off and skipping the stacker. Now, if we go down to here, we can see that for the other side, it's comparing the pointy, and it's not null. So these ones are all green, and this would actually send this through. Now, there's nothing on this belt to send through, but yeah, basically it's looking at the opposite side and saying, yes, there is something there, so we do have to send it through. Now, how you work out these belt filters and the knots and all that sort of stuff is up to you, but the important thing is you do an equals check for null on the opposite side that you're expecting to go into the stacker. So if you're routing these belts, you check the signal for the other side of the stacker, and then you go into the stacker or you skip the stacker depending on what the other side is doing, depending on whether it's null or not. And that's pretty much it. So that's the stacker for forming the right half out of the top and bottom quarters. All we do then is we do exactly the same thing. So this is the signal for the right half, and we're checking it because we're processing the left half. And here we're processing the right half, so we check the signal for the left half, and we compare if it's null. And we need to do this because sometimes an entire half of a shape can be completely null. So in this case, you want to skip the stacker. You don't even want to do the stacking here. You just want to skip the stacker entirely. And in case you're wondering, these are just more dumpers. Here we're just cutting off the left-hand side of the shape, leaving the right-hand side. And we're just doing a lot of this sort of stuff all over the place. And at this stage, you just basically get the signal. You do a whole bunch of stuff to get the appropriate shape, put it out into a display, and if it's not turning out right, you just need to mess with your rotators and with your cutters. In this case, we want an entire half of a shape, so you would never want to use a shape analyzer here unless you want to be in a massive amount of pain. In this case, just do the cutters and the rotators. It's a lot simpler. So that is it. We have got the full shape. We've got some dumpers here. This dumper is just the full shape, so we don't even need to do cutting or rotating. Here, we've got the stacking of the first and second layer. So we're processing the first layer. So we basically get the second layer out, check if it's null, and then stack it. Now, the second layer is never going to be null for a first layer, but, well, actually it can be. Because what can happen is if you're processing a shape that's only one layer, then the second layer will be null automatically. So in this case, this one would skip the stacker. Now, if you're processing a shape that's two layers, the first layer is never going to be null because that would make no sense. So this one will never skip the stacker. This one will always go through. But I'm just using the same design anyway, just for the sake of it. And then here, we've got a dumper, and this dumper is actually for the top two layers put together. So for the belt filter for this one, we actually do have to stack these guys. And so we're putting the two dots on top of here, virtual stacker, send it off, beautiful. And we have to do a little bit of null shenanigans. Basically, because I remember what I said, if the first layer is the only layer, then the second layer will be null. And what happens then is if you put null into one of the inputs of the virtual stacker, it'll output null. It won't output just the one layer, it'll output null. So what we have to do is we have to have a separate wire that says, if the second layer, which comes out here, is equal to null, then we activate this gate, and the gate is outputting the first layer. So then we just output the first layer directly onto here. So this is another one of those things where either this will be true or this will be true, and never they'll never be true at the same time, so you'll never have any clash. And then we move on, and we're now attaching the first and second layer to the third and fourth layer. Once again, we've got these fancy dumpers. It's just the third and fourth one, exactly the same logic for this dumper. And exactly the same logic for this routing thing. Because obviously, if you've got a shape that's only 2 layers, this guy will need to skip the stacker. So you've got to put the third and fourth layers together. If they're null, then you route around them. But that's basically it. I mean, the actual belt logistics for this is just merging all the belts over here. So that's not an issue. And then over here, we've got a dumper, which is the full shape. So no logic needed. It's just random operator shape number 0. And that's beautiful. And then we're sending off to the train station. So that is the entire logic for the entire MAM. And that is a step-by-step at a very low level detail of how every single bit of logic works. So yeah, because yes, I've been watching the Discord chat and some people are still getting a little bit complicated. So hopefully this helps out quite a bit. Now we're at the end of the video. I'm going to do a little bit more because I always have to go over 50 minutes, but yeah, we're going to go through, I'm not going to go through too much. Like there's some stuff here about mixers. Mixers, you can probably, this is really circuits. You can probably figure this out by yourself. It's not a circuit problem, it's a logistics problem. So I won't worry about that. I will show you the pinning. I actually went through, I won't show you the pinning. If you can go watch my phase 2 video, I went through the pinning in more detail. We'll just talk about circuits for now. Let's go down to the crystal MAM. Just sort of, no, actually, the crystal MAM is incredibly complicated. We'll keep this a simple video. We'll keep this a very simple video. The crystal MAM is way too complicated and the logic is way too off the ball. What we might end up with is actually we'll look at the new pipe filter. We'll play around with the new pipe filter and see how much fun we can have with that. So where's this guy? So yeah, because I haven't really played around with the new pipe filter too much, but it does do some very interesting stuff. So let's get some buttons here. And yeah, there's some very interesting behavior with the pipe filter. Pipe gate, sorry. So what we're going to do here is we'll just put some basic pipes for now. So as you can see, let's move them a little bit across so we can squeeze some displays in there. So right now they're currently outputting null. So if we toggle this, it becomes 1. Toggle it off again, it becomes 0. See, this pipe is still full. It doesn't automatically empty. So yeah, what we're going to do is we're actually going to get rid of that and we're going to put this one. So if we put out 0, it still does not, oh, wait, hold on, that's not right. What is going on here? What is going on here? That's not how it should be working. Who made these pipe filters? That's not good. I mean, it's still a beta, so I probably shouldn't complain too much, but yeah. So that's interesting. Let me do a little bit of experimenting. Color red. Okay. No. That still spits out stuff. Okay, so 1, it spits out. 0, spits out, and then null doesn't spit out. Something's going wrong here. What is going on? No, it's not the logic is wrong. It's something about these pipes. Somehow it's got the signal, because I expect when I delete the pipe and then recreate it, that it should stop sending stuff over. What do we do this? Okay. So now it's turned off. That's very, it's like there's a little bit of stuff in the end of it. Okay. Let's try it. So let's try 0. Let's just double check this again. Okay, so it fills out the pipe and then immediately unfills. So I think a little bit got squeezed out. Change it to 1. We're good. Change it to 0. Get shut off. Okay, now we're in business. Okay. Null, now we're in business. Color red. Not pushing through. Beautiful. Color white. Now it's pretty. Okay, so the logic is fine. That was a bit of a false alarm. The logic is definitely fine. Yeah. That one turns off. That one stays off. So it doesn't do anything fancy. So it's just a color. So if the color matches or if it gets 1, that's how I'd expect it to work. Now here's the really interesting sort of experiment that we can do, because I know I played around a little bit with this before. And I noticed some weird behavior. Okay, so we got that slowly. We're going to toggle it. Eventually it empties out. We toggle this. Okay, it does actually destroy it. That's interesting. I saw some logic before where it didn't really destroy it. I think that was without a thing. So we toggle this off and you can see right here, that white stuff is not being cleared out. Even though this one is turned on and this one is turned off, it's not being cleared out. So the pipes, the pipes are kind of sluggish. Once it's full, it's expecting something to sort of drain it out. So if we add this one here, what's going on here? Is that yellow in there now? Maybe it's a visual bug. Maybe it's a visual bug. So we toggle this, fills up with white, toggle it off. It's now white still in there. But I'm guessing that white probably won't last for long. Fluid contents 11. So we toggle yellow, drains it out, puts it back in. Okay, that's how I expected the pipe filter to work. And I'm very happy to see that that is how it works. I'm very, very happy. So this is kind of a, I'm not sure if it's a visual thing or if it's something to do with pipe dynamics, but if there's nothing connected to the pipe, then you don't actually see the pipe get emptied out. But the second you do connect something to the pipe, then it works like a train cargo wagon. So if we do this, I wonder what happens. It's still popping through. So the instant we do that, then it switches over to yellow. Instant we do that, now it's counting down. What is happening? I suppose, I mean, if you're sending 2 through at the same time, now it's got yellow, so apparently yellow is winning the battle. So we turn this off, then it counts down. So yeah, don't send 2 through different colors into the same pipe at the same time. It behaves weirdly. But and if you're worried that your pipe filter is not working correctly, make sure the pipe has an output. And if the pipe has an output, then it will behave correctly. But the actual logic of the pipe filter looks pretty solid. So yeah, it's what I'd expect it to be. And yeah, that's good. Maybe when I get around to building my hexagon MAM, I'll use the pipe filter instead, because that'll be nice and simple. Let's just keep this one going. I'm still not up to level 50. I wonder if at level 50 it starts putting pins on top of the shape. Wouldn't be surprised. So anyway, this has been a complete tutorial for how to apply wires for MAM purposes. As you can see, we did not use the belt reader even once. You don't need to. I've heard of some people who use the belt reader for stacking purposes. For example, you do something like a belt reader here And then you say, if that is empty, then this one skips over here. And technically that works, but you might end up with some slippage and weird things popping through. You might end up losing a lot of these while you're waiting for this other belt to go up, because these ones will all filter through because it's waiting for these ones to come through in the belt. So you end up with a lot of belts, extra items coming through, and then you have to dump them over the other side, filter them out. Which, if you have dumpers, is okay, but at the same time, like, might as well just get them to wait. So yeah, so I don't use belt filters. Signal producers, absolutely essential. Displays, very nice to have. Buttons, not really necessary. Logic gates, the equals and the not ones, and the gates if you're doing very fancy stuff. I did used to use OR gates, because I actually calculated these signals and then I sent them through. But now I just recalculate them at every point. It's a lot simpler that way. And then simulated buildings are awesome, but if you really don't need much, then the unstacker, the destroyer and the rotator, and the shape analyzer. You can use the other ones if you need to, but you don't need to if you don't want to. Excuse me, this bloody cough. Anyway, I got some food to eat. I got quite a lot of food. I got to have dinner. So I do hope you enjoyed that. And yes, if you have any wire questions for MAM related, watch the video, because yeah. And the crystal MAM, I mean, my God. I did go in a little bit of detail into this sort of mess, but this requires a whole other 50 minutes to explain how it works. So I'm definitely not going to do it now, but if you want, download the blueprint on the Shapes 2 Discord for phase 3, which is the crystal MAM. Actually 3.1, you want the 3.1 one, because that has all the extra pins, flat layer logic in it, which is this full one. And then everything on here, all the different components we've already talked about. So just sort of poke around and through it and just sort of try and figure it out for yourself. Yeah, so I've given you all the tools that you technically need to understand this, but what you probably want to do is just, I don't know, just delete like this bit, and then you sort of put displays at every single step and sort of figure out what's going on and sort of thing. I'm going to quit now because I made all sorts of weird changes to my MAM and I definitely do not want to save them. But anyway, thank you very much for watching this video. I do hope you enjoyed it and I hope it was informative, and I will catch you guys later. Have a good one.